In this video, I'm going to share with you everything you need to know to get started with the real-time database in your Thunkable X app. Well, hey there friend, my name is Darren, and one of my goals is to show you and explain to you in an easy, simple way how to use features inside of Thunkable. So today we're going to take a look at the real-time database in this series on Firebase. Firebase is a service by Google that has all these cool things that you can plug into your apps, and Thunkable has a few of them. So we've already talked about the sign-in component, and today we're going to talk about using the real-time database. Now, the real-time database is a database, so it's somewhere where you can store data. So today I'll show you how to set up your database inside of Firebase. I'll show you what you need to do to actually set the rules so that you can either, or how you can read and write to that database. And then we'll get started with actually sending data to the database. And that's all we're going to do in this video. Now, if you've followed along with me in the sign-in tutorials, some of this will be a bit of a repeat, but if you're just getting started, here's how you actually create your real-time database inside of Firebase. So you can come here to firebase.google.com, and you will need to have a Gmail account for this to work. But once you're here, you can go to console, and then you can see this screen is started up, and it says welcome to Firebase. And here we can look at all of our projects. Now here's my project Firepass, which is the app that we're making. So I'm going to flip back to this one in a little bit, but for now I wanted to show you how to start a new one. So you can come here to add project, and then we'll just call this our test project. So Firebase has created our project. Let's go ahead and hook up this project to our Thunkable X app. We'll do this by on this project overview page, clicking on the web button and giving our app nickname. And so here it's giving you a few codes. You can find these in other places inside of Firebase, but here's the easiest way that I have found. Now I'm going to delete this project in a little bit, so I don't care that you see this. But what we need is this API key and the database URL. So API key, you want to copy this whole key inside of the print or the quotes here, and then this whole database URL. So both of those we're going to put into Thunkable, and I'll show you where now. So inside of Thunkable, on the screen level over here in your Thunkable tree, if you come over to your properties, there's this section called Firebase Settings, and this is where you will paste your API key and your database URL. Once you have those in there, now we have Thunkable talking to Firebase, and you're good to go. So now we need to turn on the database. Firebase provides a lot of features for you to use with apps, and so each of them, when we want to use them, we need to turn them on or create them. So for the database, we'll come to the database screen here, and here it shows Cloud Firestore. Now Firestore is the new version of Firebase's database service, but we can still use their legacy version, which is the real-time database. So we'll scroll down until you see real-time database and press create database. Now this is asking, do you want to start in locked mode or do you want to start in test mode? Now locked mode means no one can write to the database and no one can read from it. So you can see here, read false, write false. Test mode means anyone who has your information can write or read from the database. So let's start out here, and I'll show you how to update this if you're using the sign-in component or the authentication inside of your app. All right, so you see here, it's created a database. This is how it looks inside of Firebase, and this will make a little bit more sense as we go further, but you'll start to see more data below here in different folders or branches. But the last thing I wanted to show you here was the rules. So the rules let Firebase know how and who you want to actually be touching this database, reading from it, writing from it. So if you are not using an authentication method or using the sign-in component in your Thunkable X app, This right here is perfectly fine. This means that everyone can read your data, and everybody can write to your data. But if you are using the sign-in component like I am in this app that I'm creating, Firepass, let's go ahead and update this so that only authenticated users can actually read and write to our database. And the way we do this is we'll take out true, and we'll put in a kind of logic statement here. So we'll say auth not equal to null. And so what this does is it says you can read and write from my database if you have authentication. So if authentication is not equal to null, that means you have it, then you can actually communicate to this. So this is how you can force people to be signed in or logged into your app in order to read and write from the database. That is all we're going to touch here on Firebase for now. Everything we're going to update. We'll come back to this later once we start writing to it. But for now, let's go jump over to the Firepass app and I'll show you what's next. So I have a few things in place just to speed these videos along. Some of these we created in the last video where we added the sign-in component to this app. And then I've added a few other things, design elements, and a few blocks to kind of help speed this along. So I'm going to go through these real quick, and then after that, we're going to get to actually save data inside of our real-time database. We'll send data from our app to Firebase. So I wanted to show you real quick what the app looks like so far. So we have a way to sign in with an email and password, or if we want to create an account, we can do that. So I'll go ahead and press login. So here's the main page of the project. And if I haven't told you, or if you haven't heard, what we're trying to make is a password manager. So a way where you can come into the app, add a password, add a website with a username and password so that you can kind of store all of your usernames and passwords in one app. So by the end of the project, right here, I want to have a list of all the websites that I have added with usernames and passwords. And then I can be able to click on one of those and then see that username and password. So we'll get to that in a later video, but for now, we can go to the add screen. So here we have a place where we can enter a website, we can enter a username, and we can enter a password, then save it or delete it or go back. So here's kind of the user interface we have in place. And you can see I have some of the navigation in place already. Now from a blocks perspective, on the screen login, I basically have everything we added in the last two videos looking at the sign-in component. For the main screen, the Firepass screen, I have a button here to log out. That was added in the last one. I have a function here that we'll talk about in a later video. I have a button here to go to the next screen. So if we want to add a password, we go to the next screen. And then on the password screen, where we're actually adding passwords, I have three blocks here. I have a block to go back. This click action also calls a function called clear values, which clears out all the text that's in all of the fields. And then I have a little helper function here called throw error. When working with the real-time database, we're going to be making calls and retrieving things from Firebase, and they always will return an error if there is an error. So we're going to be saying, if there's not an error, do this. If there is an error, show the error. We're going to be doing that a lot. And so to help this out and speed up the process, I have this here. So we can take in the error message, then we set the alert warning message to error, and then we show that alert. And if we look on the design screen, you can see I have this alert warning component already added to the app. So I hope that kind of gives you an overview of what I've already added to my Firepass app. And now I want to show you how you can actually save data in your app. So send data from your app to Firebase. And then in later videos, we'll get into how to read that data, update that data, so on and so forth. So we are storing passwords for each user in our app. Now each user can have multiple websites, and then there can be multiple users in our app. So there's kind of like different levels here. So if you think about it, we're gonna have different folders. So we have a large folder of passwords, and then below that we'll have, you know, a million users, ideally, or more realistically, one user, myself. And then that user might have, you know, 10 websites, and then within each of those websites we'll have their username and password. So if you think about it, we have like a little folder structure here going on. And the way this looks, if you were looking at it as folders, and what we're going to try and what we are going to make in Firebase is we have like a top level of passwords, and we can store other information, but in this folder we're storing passwords. In that folder we have our users with their user IDs. So here's an example of like a user ID that our sign-in component would be giving us. And within that user, they might have different different websites like Facebook and Google. And then within here, you'd have your file where you're storing the username and password. So now I want to show you how to translate this into your app. So doing this in your blocks and then storing this kind of structure inside of Firebase. All right, so on the password screen, we want to send the data to Firebase when they press that save button. So I've already added the save button here. Actually, can I find it? Button not save, yeah, button underscore save. So I can add that in. So whenever it's clicked, we want to save data to the real-time database. So the real-time database, and I haven't shown you how to add this yet, so let's do that. So if we come over to our components, we can type in real-time database, and all you have to do is drag this either on the screen, or we can drag it to our invisible components. So you just drag that in there, and then you have a real-time database. Now you can only have one per app, so I've already added one. You can see that here, and yeah, there's no properties, I've just renamed it. And then again, we have the API key and the database URL saved as properties over here. Back to when the button is clicked. So when the button is clicked, we want to call a method from the real-time database. And that method is save. So we want to save some information in the real-time database. This database stores things in a JSON format. And JSON allows you to have a key, which is like a field name, and then a value in that field. So think of it like a variable name. So you're storing some kind of value in that variable name. So before we dive deep in this, let's just try something really, really simple. So let's set our key to that top level of passwords. And then let's set our value to, say, whatever we enter in the password field. So we'll get the text from the password field and send that to value. So now what we would expect to see is when we go to the app and do this, when we enter a value in the password field and press save, then something would be created inside of Firebase here. And so let's see if that works. So I will log in, press add, enter a value in password, and then press save. Awesome, so here you see under our project here, we now have a value called passwords, and in that we have a value of QWERTY, which is what I entered in the password field. So everything's working, so now let's design that folder structure that we talked about. And I'm gonna go ahead and delete this. Now, have you seen on computers when you have folders and you're drilling down, especially on like Windows, Microsoft computers, you can see that there's like the slash there, so slash this, or you see this in like the URL here as well. You have slash this, slash that. Well, it's the same kind of concept here. So we'll have the top level of passwords, and then we want to join blocks together. So we'll join a few different values together. And for this, we'll actually have 5 in total, just to make it very explicit what we're doing here. So with the top level, I want my top level folder to be named passwords. And then after that, we will enter a slash. Now looking back at our example, we had passwords slash and then the user ID of the user. Now, if you're not using authentication, this doesn't apply to you, but for us who are following along in this series, we can come over to our variables and plug in the app user ID because we already have that. And then we will add another slash. And then back at our examples, the next folder was the website. And if you remember, they're actually entering this value on the screen. So this is actually coming through input site, this field that's already set up. So we get text from input site, and we can plug that in there. Now, one thing that I would like to do is actually go ahead and use a text block to capitalize those values, just to kind of standardize how the folders look. So now we should have a folder structure of passwords slash user ID slash uppercase of whatever the website they entered is. And then I want to enter both the password and the username in this folder. But you can see here, I only have place for one value. So what we can do is actually create an object that can store both of these values, but inside of Firebase, it would just be one value. So the way we do that is we can create an object from objects, get create object, and then we will do this and this and type in the user. So I'll just do a short name, user and pass. So we have the username and password. And so we'll plug the input pass into the pass element inside of our object. And then do the same for user and change that field to input user. Awesome. So this is what I want. So let's see how this actually looks and share with you how this will actually look inside of Firebase. So we log in, we go to the ad screen. Let's enter in a website. We'll do Google. We'll do username Darren, and we'll do Darren and my favorite number, 18. And so now let's look at it. Nothing there. We'll press save. And awesome, you can see here on the screen, we have created a top level folder of passwords. Beneath that, we have the user ID for the user that I'm logged in with. And then below that, we have our website with two values, pass, which was my password, and then user, which was my username. Now let me go ahead and add a few more in here real quick, just so you can see how this will look once we have more values in here. Alrighty, so I've added a few more in here. Below passwords, we have two user IDs for the two users I logged in as. And then below each of these user IDs, we have a list of websites that they added passwords for. And then we have the username and password for each one of these websites. Now before you go, one last housekeeping item. We didn't handle our error here. So if it was going to return an error, we really need to show that on the screen. And so I'm going to add in an if statement here with two options. So an if and an else. And we'll say if there's not an error, so this would be the happy path, as I like to call it. If there's not an error, I want to go back to the other screen. So we'll grab the navigate, and we're going to go back to the Firepass screen. So this also gives the user kind of confirmation that they actually saved the password. And then I also want to clear out any values that are here so that when we come to this screen later, if they want to add multiple passwords or multiple websites, then all the values are fresh. However, if there is an error, I want to call my function called throw error, and then we will add in that error. And so yeah, that is the basics of creating your real-time database, hooking it up to your Thunkable X app, and then actually sending data from your app to Firebase. So I showed you, remember to use the slashes to create different folders. You can plug in variables to make them dynamic. And then if you want to store multiple values, I would advise throwing those in an object and then saving that inside of the app. And then if you want to save multiple values, I advise putting those in an object and then using that as the value you're going to save. So in our next video, we will actually look at reading data from Firebase. So in this one, we sent them data, we saved data. In the next video, we're going to read data from Firebase. So be sure to check out that video. And question of the day, I wanted to ask you, why are you using the real-time database? So how are you using it? What data are you storing in it? And then 2, why are you using it as opposed to other data storage options that are available in Thunkable, like the Airtable spreadsheet, or maybe using like local variables? Why are you choosing the real-time database over others? I'd love to hear it. Let me know in the comments down below. Thanks friends for joining me in the series. It's been really fun to dive deep into this. And as always, happy coding.